Hey there! Today we're going to talk about two new pens by Fountain Pen Revolution, that is now fprevolutionusa.com. And these two pens, I have two finishes by the very kind, generous courtesy of Kevin of Fountain Pen Revolution. And this is the Darjeeling. So we need to talk about the Darjeeling for just a bit. I'll show you the parts of the pen, I'll do a writing sample, and I'll tell you what I like about it, what I don't like about it. But first of all, what are these pens about? Well, if you've never dealt with Fountain Pen Revolution, Fountain Pen Revolution is now based in the US, but was at some point based in India. And the mission of Fountain Pen Revolution is to kind of popularize the Indian pen and also make the Indian fountain pen a bit more available, because you can order some of these pens, some of the brands that FP Revolution sells online, but not all of the websites selling those pens are in English, for example. So unless you are able to speak the language, you may run into some issues. So I've always enjoyed that mission, because these are some usually pretty affordable pens, and some are a bit more expensive, but especially the FP Revolution home brand, so to speak, their own fountain pens are very affordable and often have some fun options. And now they also have flex nib options, and flex is some sort of magic word that everybody gets really involved in. So we have Darjeeling, okay? There are several colors available. This happens to be green and orange, right? These are cartridge converter filled pens, but you can also use them as an eyedropper filled pen, which means you fill the entire barrel with ink with an eyedropper, which means they will hold a lot of ink. There are a lot of nib options available. I just wrote it down because the price changes a little bit. So you have extra fine, fine and medium steel nibs, and the pen is $15 US. You have broad or 1mm stub nibs, or you have a steel flex nib that adds $4, then it becomes $19. And then you have the ultra flex steel nib, which I have on one of these pens, which of course I will show you, and that adds a bit more to the price, and then the total price becomes $29 US, which I think is still a pretty good deal. These nibs are number 6, which is quite nice, because they are fairly widely available. And you can even upgrade, I think I read on the website, to a 14 karat fine nib or 14 karat flex nib. So it does really offer a nice number of options. So I think we should now check out the pens, write with them, and see what I like and what I don't like. Let's get started. Okay, so here we go with the Fountain Pen Revolution Darjeeling, and thanks to my friend Simar, who is a tea expert, I can now tell you that would be Camellia sinensis as opposed to Camellia sinensis assamica, which, I'll be fair, Assam tea remains my personal favorite. I just sipped it right there. But this is Darjeeling. Okay, Darjeeling. So you see it here in comparison to Lamy Safari. That should give you a bit of an idea of the size of these pens. I think they are a fairly nice size. I will just use this orange one to show you the parts, and then I'll quickly come back to the orange one. I think it's a pretty decent size. I think for many people this will be a comfortable size to use. It is not super small, but it is not a massive oversized pen either. So that I think that is quite a nice size, sort of a one size fits all for most people. One size fits most, let's call it that. Okay, top of the cap, finial, same material as the cap, which is not the case in all these pens. As you can see, the orange one actually has a black finial, so not something to expect. Make sure that you get what you want, select the color that you want. Then we have a clip with the tried and true ball at the end that works very well for slipping pens into pockets or pen pouches. And these clips have a nice stiffness to them, stiff but usable. Then we have two rings. I'll come back to those. And then we have the barrel, which slightly tapers down, and then the pen opens up with a screw cap, which is quite nice, not a snap cap. So pens in this price segment, I think that's actually pretty nice. Section tapers down ever so slightly, flares out a bit, and then we have the nib. In this case, the Fountain Pen Revolution medium nib. I really like that this nib is actually engraved and not laser engraved, because I think this looks better. Feed is plastic. And then we have the barrel, as I said, can be eyedroppered. I have the feeling these come pre-greased because I feel a sort of resistance when I'm screwing the barrel into place. And then you have this, but I mean, by all means, if you're going to eyedropper it, make sure there's ample grease on there. I do like that there are many threads. So for eyedroppering, you do have a nice number of threads to make sure you don't get any leakage. Talking of which, I don't know where that came from, but there's ink on my fingers all of a sudden. I don't know if I flicked the converter around. It's one of those, oh, it's down there a bit, isn't it? I have to investigate. This is one of those very simple slide type converters. Parker makes those too, and I've always really liked those. The advantage of these is that they are so easy to use. You can operate them single-handedly, whereas with a screw-type converter you kind of have to twist, that little knob at the end. I've always liked this, also for cleaning, because you draw up water and you expel it really quickly, and it's a really fast process. The only thing I recommend for these types of converters is not to draw up the piston all the way to the back, because I have sometimes had leakage around these seals. So that's why my piston is always down there a little bit. Okay. So that was this pen. As I said, it's a pretty nice size. In this case, medium nib, but it does post nicely. And then you have that orange one, which I don't really want to go over all the parts. I just want to show you. So here you have a non-matching finial color, and the section is a non-matching color as well. So just something to be aware of. And the final thing that is interesting here is that you have this Ultra Flex steel nib here, which has two interesting things going for it. First of all, it has a very deep slit, as you can see, right? One runs all the way down there. And then you have these cutouts on the sides to tamper a bit with the, or what do you call that, mess a bit with the structural integrity of the nib, so that it opens up even more easily. Which I will say it does. It does offer a very nice amount of line variation. Now, let's write with these pens. I am not going to do a full writing sample with both, because I'm sure that you're mainly interested in the flex nib, because I know people typically are. So let me just start with the medium nib. I'll do the full writing sample with that, and then I'll try to show you the flex capacity of the Ultra Flex nib. Okay, so what do we have? We have the FPR Darjeeling. We have the medium nib here, and then we have this was no, I wanted to default to Mont Blanc Irish Green, but it's not. By Jove, imagine that mistake. This is Waterman something green. Just a regular green, it's nothing fancy. What is writing with this nib like? Well, there's some feedback. It's not scratchy. There is some feedback. I kind of like it. To me, this is a pleasant kind of feedback. Let's do some fast writing, see how well this feed keeps up. The feed, I'm clearly not going for legibility here, right? I mean, I have to point out these things, otherwise 5 people are going to be like, "Hey, your handwriting is horrid, I cannot even read it." Yes, I know that. That is not what I'm going for. I have found that I have to make a lot of these types of provisos, because otherwise people do not understand what's going on, apparently. So the feed is plastic, and on the Ultra Flex nib, the feed is plastic as well. I will come back to that. So the wetness here, I think it's pretty good. I mean, it's a pretty nice flow. It's not excessively wet, it's not excessively dry. So in my mind, that counts as good flow. Line variation, well, yeah, as always, very careful. Yes, there is a tiny bit, but I mean, I wouldn't necessarily recommend using it. I would say that if you want line variation, you have to get one of the flex nibs, right? That makes most sense. Now, if you do feel that need, you could, of course, do some reverse writing. the nib becomes scratchier for sure, but you can get away with a few words before it runs dry, and you do go from a medium to, I would say, a good fine. Now, the moment you have all been waiting for, the Ultra Flex Nib. So here we have another type of ink. This is Waterman Purple. Okay, I have to write that down because otherwise 5 people ask me, what ink is that? Because you said it, but I could not hear it. Waterman Purple. Okay, now these flex writing, it's not really my thing. I'm just not very good at it. So I like to point that out because otherwise 5 people are going to be like, your flex writing is horrid. You know, again, I have to point out these things. So there is that. Now, this nib I have found to be very interesting. I have not primed the feed. I have left this. I used it last night. I left it capped overnight, just lying down horizontally. I have not primed the feed because I wanted to give you a very honest assessment of how this nib writes. As you can see, this one is pretty wet. Line variation. You start out with a pretty fine nib. I'm going fast, but this nib does keep going. You have to slow down a bit, and at some point it will start to railroad. This is not uncommon, especially in modern flex. I'm pushing this nib very hard here, and you can see that it will sort of go. You will get some railroading, it will sort of go. Now what I'm going to do in just a second is do prime the feed, because once you have this feed primed, it'll actually write very interestingly, but as I said, I wanted to give it to you without priming it. Now, I have adjusted the angle here to kind of how you would sort of use an oblique dip nib holder. I'm pointing that out because otherwise 5 people are going to be like, you are holding the pen in an utterly strange manner. So this is why I'm doing that, okay, so that you align the sort of the tines with the paper for flex writing. Okay, now of course I let that dry out a little bit, but I think we're good to go. I'm not going to push this to the max straight away. Let's see if I can just do a little bit of sort of conservative flex writing. That here, this was not the pen's fault. I made that skip. And you do see there is a little bit of railroading, but I didn't really slow down. Let's see if I can do that while slowing down, because I have to point this out, because otherwise 5 people are going to be like, you should slow down when you are doing flex writing, otherwise it shan't work. You know, so let me write down and slow down now. Write down? That's weird. Boom. I think that is pretty sweet. Now, I'm going to push this nib to the max now, okay, the absolute max, because if I don't, 5 people are going to be like, what is the maximal capacity of this nib? So, let's do this to the max. Not taking any measures to really keep this thing writing, right? Now again, I'm pushing this nib to the max. I don't think I can push it any farther. And you see that at this point it starts out okay, and then it does start to railroad. But I have not primed that feed. Now let me try that again for you, having primed the feed. I have found that when it comes to modern pens, you just need to deal with that. Like, this is not an ebonite feed. This is not vintage 14K flex. So I'm just squeezing ink, actually the last drop of ink that was left in that converter. I've just squeezed it into the feed. Now let's see if we can do this again. Again, I wasn't slowing down. This is Rhodia paper, which has a bit of a coating, right? There we go. Not bad. There was a little less ink left than I thought there was, but you can imagine that if this is a completely full converter and you really make sure that feed is completely primed, you can get away with some pretty serious flexing here. And the nib is fine. It's not bent out of shape, it's not sprung, it can handle this. And again, I mean, look at what I'm doing to these poor tines. I'm pushing them very hard, but they snap back. Okay, I hope that was an adequate demonstration of the pens. Let's talk about what I like about it, what I don't like about it. Okay, what do I like, what do I not like about these pens? Well, the lineup, I mean, of FBR pens is becoming more and more impressive, right? There is, my friend Murray actually lent me some of these pens. So here, for example, you have the Indus, which is a piston-filled pen. I have reviewed this model. You can look it up if you're interested, which is $17. And then there is the Himalaya. These depends a bit on what material you pick, but about $29. And now we have this the Darjeeling, and provided you buy one of the stock nibs, not one of the flex nibs or one of the broader nibs, you can have this for as little as $15, which I think really is quite affordable. Now, having said that, what do I like, what do I not like about it? The affordability for me definitely is a big thing. It's kind of fun when you want to give someone a pen gift. You want to maybe expose people to fountain pens. You may want to have an inexpensive pen that you can just let roll off your desk or use in horrid circumstances and don't have to be worried if it gets damaged or clogged or whatever. And I'm saying clogged because my friend Stephen is an archaeologist who works in the field and has all kinds of mud-related issues. So I mean, that's for those types of purposes. If you do want to, for some ungodly reason, have a fountain pen in those circumstances, then you could use something like this, which wouldn't set you back too much, right? So that, I think, is very nice. I also like that the pens are slightly larger. Again, I wouldn't necessarily call this an oversized pen, but if you compare that to, let's say, that Indus I showed you before, right, which is this, and then you look at the Darjeeling, it has a bit more girth, which I think is quite pleasant. It's to me it's a very pleasant size of pen to write with, and that postability really helps as well. So very simple, a nice, relatively featureless section. I think that's not necessarily bad either, because people tend to like different things, right? Barrel-shaped or hourglass-shaped, whatever. This is relatively featureless, and I found it quite neutral. I gave it to a couple of people to try out, and they all said, yeah, writes pretty nicely. So that's quite good, and it's comfortable, I should say. You can upgrade nibs if you want. If you want flex, if you don't need flex, you don't have to get it. Then the pen becomes cheaper. If you don't want a broader nib, the pen becomes cheaper. So that's all kind of nice, right? I like that. I also like that there are many threads in the barrel for eyedroppering. If you are going to eyedropper this model, you see it takes a while to unscrew that, but given that it's eyedropper compatible, those threads will be helpful because ink will not seep out so easily, which is a good thing, right? So I kind of like that. Things I don't like so much. Well, there are some things. The flex nib is very responsive, is very nice. I really like that. Again, I'm not really a flex writer, but I appreciate the option and that it's there. I would like to see an ebonite feed. Noodlers offers that on their flex pens. I think that the ebonite feeds have a bit of an advantage because the ink flow properties, I think, are a little better. These feeds are clearly struggling to keep up with especially the excessive flex of that ultra steel flex. So sorry, I just had to double check the name. The ultra flex nibs that are offered, the ones with the cutouts as well as the deep slit. So it struggles a bit. You can prime the feed, especially one of those slide type converters. That's really easy. If you do choose to eyedropper fill the pen, then of course that option is eliminated. So that is a bit of an issue. And yes, I have cleaned the pens, I have cleaned the feeds, I've done all that. And it is a property of multiple things. There's of course also the ink you use. Some of the thicker, more viscous inks I found to work better with these types of flex pens. There's the paper you use. I've had some pretty good results on paper that's not coated like Rhodia, but I always use Rhodia for the review, so I kind of want to do that here too. So there are all these considerations. I think it's just the same discussion we have every time. Modern flex is not the same as vintage flex. It just isn't. But if you absolutely need to have it, and you don't want to spend $150 on, or way more, on a vintage flex nib, yeah, for $29 you can have an ultra flex nib, and it will give you a lot of line variation if you need that. You may just have to work a bit with the feed, priming the feed, etc. You may have to modify the feed if you're comfortable doing that. There are guidelines online on how to quote-unquote hack a feed, so you can do that. I found the Ultraflex nib to be a little bit prone to skipping, and I noticed that was because even with very light pressure the tines open up a little bit. So you really, if you use that pen for normal, I mean non-flex writing, you really have to use a very, very light hand, otherwise the tines may open a bit and that may cause skipping behavior. The final thing I will say is the fit and finish on these pens is nice. It's not perfect. You like this ring, it moves a little bit, right? There's some wiggle space, and I think on this one, I think it was maybe the top one, or was this? Yeah, here, well, this bottom one is a little tighter. So this one, the green model happens to have a slightly tighter, yeah, it's tighter ring. So that looks good, actually. These are details, but again, in the cheapest variation, you're buying a $15 pen. I think it would be unrealistic to expect that has the same fit and finish as, let's say, a $150 pen or a $1,500 pen. You are buying an inexpensive pen in the lower end of the segment. That doesn't mean it's a bad pen. It just means that there will be certain things that you may have to take into account. And yes, a little moving ring, yeah, that could happen. It's the way it is, right? You also notice that the rings are not completely flush with the cap. They stick out a little bit, so that there are these things. Oh, here you go. There was that top ring, that one that moves a bit on this model. These are things, yeah, these are details, and I know that some people would be offended by that. Well, then don't buy the pen, right? It's pretty simple. Again, I think you have to be realistic about what it is. A pen at that price, yeah, that may have some cosmetic issues. Overall, I think they are very comfortable, they're very pleasant to write with, and I think overall they work well. So that is pretty sweet. Okay, a very kind thank you once again to Kevin for sending me these pens. I appreciate it. I hope this was useful, and I'll gladly see you later. Bye bye.